Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Crow, and other members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you, General Sadat, and our other members of the panel here for taking the time today. There are many reasons that our mission in Afghanistan was troubled. There can be no denying that one decision, President Biden's April 14, 2021 order to withdraw from Afghanistan, is directly responsible for the collapse of the Afghan government and its security forces. And that was what we have been brought here today to discuss. Certainly, prior administrations contributed to the poor state of Afghanistan. The Afghan government and military created by President Bush was ill-suited to combat an insurgency. President Obama's strategy was muddled, its surge was under-resourced and executed on an unrealistic timeline. And the administration opened negotiations with the Taliban. And President Trump's deal with the Taliban, known as the Doha Agreement, was an absolute disaster. But this is extremely important. Despite the mistakes of previous administrations, on April 13th, 2021, the government of Afghanistan was still standing, and the Afghan military and police were still fighting the Taliban. Despite statements from the Biden administration that it was cornered to execute the terms of the Doha Agreement, the administration was not obligated to do so. The Taliban was not living up to the terms of the deal as it continued to shelter and support al-Qaeda and other groups. The Biden administration knew this, and yet it followed through on the Doha Agreement anyway. The fact is that President Biden was determined to leave Afghanistan. The Doha Agreement was a convenient excuse to do so. President Biden's order to withdraw had an immediate and devastating effect on the Afghan government and military. Once the order was given, U.S. forces were no longer supporting their Afghan partners. Instead, the immediate focus was on packing up and leaving. We all remember the U.S. military turning off power at Bagram Air Base and leaving in the middle of the night without informing our Afghan partners. For another powerful example of this, I strongly suggest watching Retrograde, which documents the impact of the withdrawal on General Sadat's command. You will see that U.S. Special Forces, which supported the General Sadat's Corps, immediately ceased operations. Despite difficulties in the South, this team of special forces was crucial in supporting the Afghan military operations and holding the Taliban at bay. Without U.S. support, the Afghan military couldn't sustain its operations. We built an Afghan military that was dependent on Western contractors for maintenance and logistics. Without this support, Afghan air assets, which were operating at a high tempo due to the Taliban onslaught, were quickly degraded. There are other factors which I've highlighted in my written testimony that I do hope we discuss today. General Sadat can no doubt speak authoritatively from his experience on the impact of President Biden's withdrawal order and it had on his soldiers and their morale. One thing is clear. The outcome, the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, was predictable. U.S. government, military, and intelligence officials said that the Afghan government wouldn't be under threat for 2 years after the U.S. withdrawal. After the withdrawal was announced, I predicted that the Afghan government wouldn't make it by the end of the summer. Kabul fell on August 15th. Panjshir, the last holdout province, collapsed on September 7th. Taliban didn't take control of Afghanistan in 11 days. This was a process that began the day that the withdrawal was announced, and it was set up by years of failure. How did multi-billion-dollar government organizations get it so wrong? These are questions that you must ask. The mistakes of past administrations were either correctable or could have been mitigated over time. The order to withdraw was final, and once executed, irreversible. However, if the Biden administration was hell-bent on leaving, it could have executed a phased withdrawal that it could have given the Afghan military a fighting chance. Why wasn't a responsible withdrawal from Afghanistan planned and executed? The implications of the withdrawal fiasco, both the decision to leave and the abandonment of our ally of 20 years, and the physical implementation of the withdrawal have lasting effects. We left an ally which sacrificed hundreds of thousands of its security personnel and an untold number of civilians battling the Taliban alone to the predations of a terror group that sponsored al-Qaeda both before and after 9/11. Al-Qaeda remains ensconced in Afghanistan and today is operating at least 6 training camps, as well as safe houses and a media operations center. Several al-Qaeda leaders serve in the Taliban government. Sirajuddin Haqqani, one of the 2 deputy emirs of the Taliban and its Minister of Interior. He is a specially designated global terrorist for his ties to al-Qaeda. So are an untold number of his deputies listed as specially designated global terrorists. The Haqqani network, which Sirajuddin Haqqani runs, is listed as a foreign terrorist organization. Sirajuddin Haqqani's Interior Ministry issues national ID cards and passports to al-Qaeda leaders, operatives, and their families. Let that one sink in. Beyond Afghanistan, the ramifications of the precipitous withdrawal are still being felt today. Jihadists across the globe have been emboldened by our defeat. Our allies question our commitments. Our adversaries and enemies do so as well. President Biden's order to leave Afghanistan has gravely impacted U.S. national security. We must accept these facts if we wish to avoid these mistakes in the future. Thank you very much.